Uh, Welcome everyone in attendance to the next National Soccer Coaches Association of Canada Behind the Bench webinar. I'm really pleased to be joined by a Canadian coach who's got an extensive background in the game as a professional player, and of course as a professional coach, and also a national team coach, an international coach. And of course that's the topic of our talk today is what does it take to become a professional coach. And so Colin Miller, welcome. It's great to have you on our webinar here. And maybe if you'd like to start, just give us a brief kind of introduction and background. As I said, I know you've got lots of experience in the pro game at the higher levels. And how did you get started? And briefly, how did you end up here where you are now?
Well, first of all, thank you, Richard, and John. I know John's in the background there somewhere, but thank you for the invitation. It's very kind. I don't know if we'll learn anything today, but we should have a good laugh if nothing else. But,
absolutely.
Coaching was always something that I wanted to do, even as a player. Towards the tail end of my career in the Scottish Premier League, even the referees called me coach because that was my nickname back in Scotland. But it was a long and very winding road to get to where I am now, to be honest with you. I was incredibly fortunate during my playing career to work with some terrific managers, some not so, that I've learned from as well. Richard, I'm sure we'll touch base later on in the conversation. But I always had leadership qualities, I guess, as a footballer. I captained our national team on 38 occasions, and I always wanted to be a coach. So when I went from the Toronto Blizzard back to the famous Glasgow Rangers, and for those who are listening, this is the home of the famous Glasgow Rangers in the 60s, the print that I have here. I played for the club that I supported, that I loved, and still love very dearly. And during that time, Jock Wallace, the manager, actually mentioned to me that I should really work on getting my coaching licenses, believe it or not. And I was at 20 years of age. So I then got sold to Doncaster Rovers, Richard. And during that time at Doncaster Rovers, I took out my English C license, or preliminary license, I believe it was called at that time. And that was taken over a number of weekends. And it certainly helped at the fact that you were a professional footballer. That gave you a sort of head start, if you like. So I did that down in England and came back up to Scotland to play for Hamilton Academical, who were in the Scottish Premier League at the time. And then, of course, the story of my career, I managed to get them relegated again. So we're back in the first division. And some of the staff were part-time. But at 23 years of age, I was given the opportunity to be the reserve team coach. So I would train in the morning with the first team lads, and I played over 200 games for Hamilton. And then in the evenings, I would work with the reserve team and actually take the team. I was in charge of the team, but I had one of the best mentors anyone could ever have in the game, and his name was Willie McLean. And the former Scottish national team coach, Craig Brown, told me that Willie McLean was the most knowledgeable football person that he knew. So I had Willie sitting in the corner, just arms folded, listening to everything that I was saying to the players. And if you think that taking your various licenses is very intimidating, when you have Willie McLean sitting in the corner, listening to all your details, what an education it was, Richard. And he certainly made some serious impression on my coaching career. He made some real good points, not to generalize all the time. Can we be more specific, and so on and so forth. So then it kind of progressed from there. I became the Hamilton's player manager at 33. Myself and Billy Davis was the manager of Motherwell at the time. We were the two youngest managers in Scottish football. So that was pretty good. Now, I'm just going to go through these pretty quickly now, because I know we're going to cover them in a little bit more depth. But so I was the Hamilton player manager for a year. And I'm looking forward to speaking about that one, because I know we'll probably have a number of younger coaches on the call here today that maybe have aspirations to be in the manager or first team coach or whatever. So that was quite an experience. From there, I came back to at the Abbotsford Soccer Association, where I'm now the technical director and lead coach in terms of the coaching development. I work with a fantastic boss called Ian Knight, and Ian is was a former Youth England international. For his troubles, we all have our problems, you know, but I try and look after the big fella. So we get on very well. There's a great deal of trust, and that's something else that at times can be lacking in our industry, that's for sure. But really, really enjoying being back home. This is where I live, but for so many years I've lived away from the family, and we'll cover that later on. And then during my time as the Abbotsford head coach, from 2000 to 2007, I became Holger Osiek's assistant coach of the men's national team, and that was an experience. That was a bit of an eye-opener as well. You know, both working with the players and of course working with Holger, who wasn't everyone's cup of tea, Richard. He was, you know, I got on very, very well with Holger, and a lot of trust with him. And I saw good things, and we'll go through that later on also. We're going to go through a lot of things by the looks of it, but it was a great education for me, a great education. His experience was wonderful. And after that experience of Abbotsford soccer, I don't know how many other Canadians have actually coached in the English Premier League, but I was the first team coach at Derby County in the English Premier League. And I worked with Billy Davis, who I played with at Rangers. And I'm going to cover that in a fair bit of detail. I'm sure some of the listeners are very interested in that experience. But Billy was easily the best coach that I've seen on field. Tremendous attention to detail, very, very similar to John Herdman. From there, I came back to the Abbotsford Soccer Association. Like everything in professional football, your terms seem to be very short-lived, and so that was another very short-lived experience, but a wonderful experience nevertheless. And I became the Abbotsford head coach again. I then got the opportunity to go and work as the first head coach with the Victoria Highlanders in the PDL. And that was a great experience. That was our owner, Alex Campbell, at the time, did a great job in trying to professionalise everything of the running of the club. Drew Faraty was the general manager. And we did a great job of trying to raise the profile of football on the island, which is a real hotbed for football. You know, just winning the CPL Championship, of course, with Pacific. It doesn't surprise me the success that they're having over there, because it's been for many, many years a real good football place for sure. And then I became the University of Fraser Valley's women's head coach, Richard. And that was an experience I loved. I loved every minute of it, working with the women there. And I was actually in tears when I left the job to then go to be the Whitecaps assistant coach with Tater Thordison, who was just a wonderful person, first of all. And in my opinion, and I know I do the colour commentary in the radio for the Whitecaps. I have done for the last 3 or 4 years. As you can see, I have the face and bone structure for radio. So it works out differently for me. But in my opinion, I thought the Whitecaps released Tater far, far too early. I thought he was doing a good job. Still had command of the dressing room as well. But it was another wonderful experience working alongside him. And then I was also John Herdman's one of his staff coaches with the women's team, and possibly could have gone to the Olympics in London with John as a member of his staff, maybe as a scout or so on. But unfortunately, I stayed back in Vancouver and continued to look for work here. But that was another wonderful experience working with the girls. It was great. And then I became the manager of FC Edmonton for 5 years in the North American Soccer League. And that in itself, what a great experience it was. There were some genuine highs and some genuine lows as well. And we'll cover that, of course, as part of it. It's not all Pep Guardiola's, I can assure you. And then I was a North Shore Girls technical director for about just over 2.5 years, fairly recently. And then since last March, April time, I've been working here back in Abbotsford and still doing the colour commentary for the Whitecaps. So that brings us right up to date. So that gives you a brief rundown there, Richard.
Yeah, it's quite an amazing career, and I mean, congratulations, of course, on all of your accomplishments. And I know you mentioned, I don't know if there's another Canadian who's coached in the English Premier League. I'm not sure about that one.
I'm not sure. I mean, Paul Lido's done some good coaching as well, yeah. But I don't know if it was in the Premier League.
In the Premier League, I don't know. Yeah, well, that's another, I guess, an excellent list of accomplishments, and maybe that's one of the best ones. And honestly, a lot of what you're saying really rings true to me. A couple of notes that I took. First of all, that a lot of these jobs end up being short-lived. Whether that's a good or a bad thing, I don't know. But I guess it's good if you're not really enjoying it there. But sometimes it's you want to stay and you can't. And I think I'm surprised that we never actually crossed paths, because I mean, I was with the Ottawa Furies, so I know I competed against you in ASL, and I mean, I worked with the women's programs, but never with John specifically. I mean, I was with the Pan Am Games team in 2015. So anyway, we must have just missed each other, but.
It's easy. Yeah.
Anyway, still, both our careers are still young, I guess. So
I hope so.
it might still happen. So I guess maybe if we can kind of start, with, let's say, with Hamilton Athletic, this was sort of your transition, playing to coaching and being a player coach. So you said you kind of had a knack for it right away, and perhaps you even had a knack for it while you were playing. Did you see it as a like as coaching, that it was going to be a career, or did you sort of think, well, like, I'm passionate about football, I love football, and this is the next step because I can't play anymore? Or,
at Hamilton Academical, it was an opportunity that I must have earned, to be honest with you. I must have shown those sort of qualities as the captain of the club as well. And it just seemed a natural progression. I still listen to coaches very much, and how they address their players. We never stop learning, Richard. And as a young player, still at that age, 23, I was very wet behind the ears, if you like, in terms of coaching. But I watched the sessions. I watched Stephen down in Doncaster. I watched Jock Wallace at Rangers, Graham Souness after that, and then Walter Smith. I watched how they conducted themselves, how they set sessions up. And then, as I said, I had this wonderful mentor in Willie McLean, who was a real inspiration for me. He was also a Scottish A licence instructor down at Largs when we did our A licences and stuff. Willie was a terrific mentor, so it came natural to Willie after all of his years of experience. So a combination of what I was doing on the field, it actually helped me being the coach, because it makes you think about both sides of the game, and you could really have an appreciation of why a coach wanted to throw a pot of hot tea over you or something like that at half time, or why he wanted to pat you on the back. So, but it made me a better footballer, But as it progressed, I also took the Hearts under-14 team to the Milk Cup in Northern Ireland. And we beat Manchester United, Middlesbrough, Newcastle United, lost to Everton in the semi-final. And then, we finished third in that tournament, which was wonderful. But that was my first real opportunity in tournament competition with young boys that I had never even met before, because the manager had been sacked. It was a long story, but what a great experience that was, because we played Manchester United, believe it or not, under-14s, crowd of 5,000 there, live on TV in Northern Ireland, and our boys at Hearts beat them. So it was quite an occasion. Absolutely wonderful it was.
Right on, great. A question just came up, which is from Mark Peckham here, saying, would you be able to speak a bit about your coaching philosophy? So I think it's a great question.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. All I work on, Mark, I live my life very simply. I'm not a complicated person. I'm quite a humble guy, and I coach that way. I work on basic principles of the game constantly, and I challenge players. Of course, we do that always, but my philosophy is to attack in numbers when we can, to defend in numbers, and just everything that's simple about the game. That's what I do. I don't reinvent the wheel. I never have tried to reinvent the wheel. And I learned some of that, Mark, from Tony Waiters, God rest him, who was a fantastic national team coach. And when we played in that group and that qualified for the '86 World Cup, and then afterwards, every single player knew exactly what their role was when they went across the white line. And I wanted that as a coach. I wanted to be able to, for our players, not to always, even at the youth levels, not to always look over to the side. Hey, Colin, what do I do now? What should I do here? What should I do? because if we do enough work during the week to plant the seeds for the kids and players at the professional level, then you're hoping that they can go and think for themselves when it comes game day. Because the manager, when you stand on the sidelines, it's very seldom you can really make a big impact on a game. So you're hoping that some of the tools that you've given your players during the week at training, that will help them have more football awareness. So even at the club at the moment, I'm getting our coaches, Mark, to work in more game-related situations. So less standing around in lines, in fact, no standing around in lineups, more activity. And I'm looking for our coaches to be able to step in, stop a practice, correct it, and then get back at it and let the kids play. So it's working on game-related situations as much as possible. I remember being at a club when, as a manager, and one of the guys said, can we play a little bit more out of the back, or can we do this or that? I said, guys, we still have players that run into mannequins. And you think we're going to be Manchester City and play 16 passes before you get out of your 18-yard box. It's not going to happen. So you have to find out what your level of players is about and what you can do. But my philosophy is simple, quick, defend with aggression and passion, and trying as a club to develop a culture so that if you're bringing in another player, that player still will have the same culture.
Excellent. Yeah, it's a pretty thorough answer, and I like the point of focusing, keeping things simple, and hopefully the ultimate objective there is to get players to be able to think for themselves. So it's good.
Yes, absolutely.
Good advice. I thought, I mean, if you can speak a bit about sort of your transition into Canada then, because I know, obviously you've split your time, from starting in Scotland and then coming here. So how did you come about, let's say, the decision to come to Canada, and where did you end up? And
yeah, great question. It all started, well, my family, I'm sure my wife, my kids see this, Richard, they're going to go crazy because they're going to hear this again. But my family immigrated from Scotland in '75, and we became Canadian citizens in 1982. So I played for the Toronto Blizzard for 2.5 seasons in the old NASL, and then went back to the famous Glasgow Rangers. And then it came back. So during my time as a national team player, we had a wonderful physiotherapist who just passed away fairly recently, Barry Crocker. And Croc lived in Abbotsford. And he said to me, he says, well, I was 27 when he asked me this question, Richard. He said, would you like to come back and be the head coach of Abbotsford Soccer? And I said, where's Abbotsford, So he explained what his club was all about, and he was on the board, I believe, at the time. And I said, Croc, I'm never going to get old. I'm invincible. But anyways, he kept going. He was so far ahead of his time, Richard. It was fantastic. But long story short, the Hamilton experience was not great. We'll come to some of those details later on. And I resigned from the club, and it took the board a week to accept the resignation. But I came back to Abbotsford, where my family has lived for 21 years. So I became, I believe, the first paid head coach in BC at a club. So we sort of set the standard, if you like, in BC with what we were doing. And everything about that, we had wonderful volunteer coaches, Alan Errington, Doug Roseland, Neil McKecken, guys like this that had been around the game. Bobby Poole had coached at the provincial level. We had a lot of very, very good guys, and that were in it for the game. There were no agendas, Richard. They wouldn't have survived with us had there been different agendas. It was all for the players. That was what it was all about, and probably why we were interviewed by the CSA, and we were actually voted number 2 in Canada at that time. There was ourselves and Oakville that were both doing wonderful jobs with our players, and it was just principles of the game were simple. Standards were set simple. We raised the bar. You're not allowed to do this. You can't do that. When we travel, we have to behave properly. All these sorts of things, and it really rubbed off on the players. So that's how I got back to Canada. From the coaching. Of course, my wife was born and raised in Vancouver, so it was like coming back home. Both of our kids were both born in Scotland, so it was an adventure for them.
Great. And I mean, I know, obviously you had that time, playing for the national team and all that. So clearly gets a good experience all around as a player and as a coach. And so I know in some of like in your brief introduction there, you kind of mentioned, let's say the concept of some of these jobs being a little bit short-lived. And I know you touched on perhaps what happened at Hamilton, and it wasn't, maybe all of it wasn't a positive experience. So can you speak a bit more about that? Because I know, as I said, it rings true for me. Sometimes you get very you're excited, you want to work somewhere, and it starts off great, but in the pro game and the higher levels, often you're dealing with everything between egos and personalities of the management and other, and so there's definitely a lot of challenges. And I know our audience are interested probably to hear the story of what's it like, and why is it that sometimes you don't stay in a particular environment, and then maybe if you can elaborate on specifically what happened in some of the other jobs that you had there.
Yeah, well, what happened really, Richard, during my playing career, I took out my UEFA B license and my UEFA A license. The Players Association paid a percentage of that as well, which was helpful. So I was certified at the A license level at quite an early age. And how it came about, of course, as I said earlier, I played over a couple of hundred games for Hamilton, and we were very successful as a team. It was some of the happiest days of my footballing career were at Hamilton. So we actually played against Hamilton one Saturday. The following Saturday, I become their player manager. So I went through the interview during the week. I'd heard through the papers, and people contacted me and would I like to speak to the board, and I spoke to the board, and they hired me. And you go from being a guy who goes in, and at that time your football boots were polished for you every morning. The hardest part of it being a footballer was putting your boots on the right feet. So you go from being that player, having everything looked after you, to being the guy who actually makes sure that absolutely everything is done. So the level of responsibility, every question needs to be answered by you. And you can appreciate, I'm sure, that at 33 years of age, you don't know all the answers, Richard. And, when I look back now, I wish that I had served a sort of an apprenticeship as an assistant, to be brutally honest with you, because was I ready? Yeah, in my mind, maybe I thought I was ready. But when I look back now, I loved it, Monday to Friday, working with the players on the training pitch, making sure everything was professionally done, just as you could picture it. But then, lo and behold, on the Saturday, there's 11 players who are not going to allow you to do what you've just worked on. And at the end of the day, for me, it comes down to the level of the player that you're working with. Are they at the level to compete in that particular league? And, I brought in, a very high quality manager to observe what I was doing at the start. And they said, I couldn't do any more, because you're only working with the tools that you have here, and you're playing against teams that, were better than you, simple as that. But it was an incredible experience, Richard, and a very humbling experience. When you get relegated as a player, it's one thing, it's horrendous. But when you're the manager, when you're the person that's actually in charge of that club being relegated, it can be very humbling and very eye-opening for you. But I was motivated to start the next season. We won 2 of the first 4 games, but I looked at it and I went, no, I don't fancy this anymore, because I didn't see a light at the tunnel. And there were other things that I won't go into that were working behind the scenes. My family was suffering because of it, because I've actually put in my notes there to you, Richard, that the more you put into something doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be successful. I watched a very, very good documentary with Ronnie Delia, the former Celtic manager, and thankfully had a hard time at Celtic, which was great, but I can't say too loud. But he spoke about when he first started becoming a manager in Norway, I believe it was, and he won his first 2 games. He thought it was great, and all of a sudden it went pear-shaped for him, and he started to work harder and harder, get up early in the morning, and it actually took over his life. Well, the same thing for me, to be brutally honest with the people that are listening here. It could have cost me my marriage, because I was coming home after getting beat, two young kids, a young baby, my daughter, and my son Ryan. And I didn't know they existed, Richard. I actually didn't know they existed. The little general, she'd be speaking to me, and I was in total la la la, and I can tell another story. I was working so hard to try and fix it on a Friday afternoon, 4:30 in the afternoon. Terry Butcher, who was an England legend, a famous Glasgow Rangers legend, he called into Hamilton. He was the manager at Dundee United at the time. Mm-hmm. And he said, "Is the wee man in? Is Colin in?" And the secretary said, "Yes, he's in." He says, "Put him on the line." And I picked up. So Big Terry, I was at Rangers when Terry was there. He says, "What on earth can you possibly be doing at 4:30 on a Friday afternoon?" And I says, "Well, I'm getting everything sorted for next week, making sure that the pitches are organised and so on." He said, "I'm going to phone back in about 20 minutes. And if you're still there, I'm going to drive down and I'm going to kick your lights in." Basically was what it was saying. He says, "You get home, get back to your family. There's nothing that you could possibly do at this stage that's going to affect tomorrow or next week." So it just showed you how much that, regardless of the work that you do, and we'll touch on this later on, getting the balance in your life right, mm-hmm. It took over. My whole world was about that. And the worst thing is I actually lived in Hamilton as well. So everywhere I went, you were getting grief, or you were getting pat in the back, whatever it was, Richard. So, but Monday to Friday it was fantastic, but Saturday was the problem.
Yeah, well, that's an excellent story. I mean, what you're saying, again, as I said, it really does ring true. And I mean, I've had maybe similar situations in my life, and I think, perhaps again, just looking at, without knowing all the story, if you were to say to our coaches and everyone listening, well, I resigned from a professional job, it sort of seems, well, why would you do that? And but then when you look at the details and you know what it's really like, then it's not so surprising, right?
There's a point, Richard, you mentioned the word ego a little bit earlier on. There is a point where you first get the job, you're strutting about, you think you're the bee's knees, but then sort of reality sets in, and the vast majority of the managers in the world are struggling, right? Because there's only one team that can win the league.
Yeah.
Or you've got, in every league in the world, you've got maybe 3 or 4, other than some leagues, that can win the league. And then you've got a middle group that are quite happy to be in the league. And then you've got the bottom that are fighting relegation. And it's the same in every league in the world. So you've got managers, not every manager, the sense of entitlement now from supporters doesn't help the situation now, because they think they've got a divine right to win every single game of football. And I look at my time at Hamilton as an example. We're playing the famous Glasgow Rangers in the cup tie. Andre Kanchelskis is earning £40,000 a week at Rangers, and that paid for my entire squad, my bills, it ran the club for a month. What this guy was earning a week, and how can you compete with that? And yet the crowd are giving me dog's abuse from the crowd.
If he scores a goal, it's
you know what I mean. So it's not a fair fight all the time. So our coaches that are listening in here, that now not every job is horrendous. I don't mean it that way, but you have to go into things eyes wide open, because if you think you're going to be the next Pep Guardiola, or you think it's going to be that easy to do the job, it's not. Because again, you're dependent on your budgets. It depends on everything that you can do, the type of players that you can bring in. It's that a lot of times will determine the level that you get to.
For sure. Well, again, great advice. I see another question has just come in from Rasul. A recommendation to a 29-year-old Canadian who wants to start coaching at the pro level. Step by step. Is there a step-by-step guideline about how to get licensed?
Sorry, what was the person's name?
So his name is Rasul.
Yeah, thanks, Rasul. This is a $1 million question, isn't it? Because there's so many different avenues that coaches can take nowadays to get into that environment. For instance, when I was at FC Edmonton, I had Jeff Paulus as my assistant, and there was a lad who asked if he could come and watch our training sessions. And we said, absolutely, our doors open every day. You could come and watch the training. He said, because back east, when I asked that same question, I wasn't allowed to come anywhere near the training, which is disappointing. I can understand to an extent, Richard, but it's disappointing because there are young men and women that want to get to the next level of football, and at times they have no idea how to get there or even experience what it's like to go and be even watch a first team training session.
Yeah.
So I think we've got to try and maybe open the doors a little bit more to I'm not saying every session is wide open, but now and again you can have some open days and bits and pieces just to see how sessions are run. But my suggestion would be, get yourself at a club or if it's a provincial level or something like that, the highest level that you can get to, and be good at that level. Be good at that level, because you'll be noticed. If you're doing good things, people are aware of it, and if it's consistently good, they'll be very aware of it. They have a great program there. Well, who's in charge of that? Well, it's this person there, and that's the beauty of it. Now, in order to get to, I was very fortunate, Richard. Obviously, I played professionally for nearly 18 years. So I was in that environment, and the majority of the candidates that were taking our UEFA A license and B license at the time were all professional footballers. Yeah. There were some school teachers in there. There were people that came from the States and so on. This is going back a few years now, but the vast majority of them were footballers, and they wanted ex-players to come back in to be coaches. Now, just because you've been a professional footballer doesn't mean that you're going to be a good coach. John Herdman wasn't a professional football player, and he's done a wonderful job for our men and our women. Yeah. So, but try to get yourself to a level where you're observing a higher level of football, not, with the greatest respect, grassroots, where it's, unless you're wanting to be a technical director of a grassroots club, go and observe, see what's going on, but go to clubs that are doing the right things. Go into clubs.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Well, it's good advice, and I know you mentioned, and I know you had said this even in your notes to me earlier about how you would have wanted, or you would have wished that you might have had an apprenticeship.
Yeah.
Beforehand, and I think that to me, I think that's great advice, and I'm thinking about that too, even for myself, like how beneficial it was to be in those higher environments and not to be the boss right away, or the top person right away. So you get to learn from other people, and I think that
because there's a lot of things involved in it, Richard. You're accountable to a board of directors. You're accountable to your players every single day. There's a level of expectation when you're the person standing in front of that group of players, that you know the answers to things, that you can find out answers, you can make a genuine impact to that.
Yeah.
And then at the professional level, you're accountable to the supporters. They're expecting to see a team that can compete week in and week out. So there's an incredible amount of pressure. So when I first started at Hamilton, as an example, I had an assistant who was one of the captains of Red Star Belgrade. He had played for Yugoslavia and may have been the captain of Yugoslavia, had a wonderful, wonderful playing career. He was a fabulous person, but as an assistant, I had to move him out because he wasn't an assistant. I'd come in, there'd be blood pouring down my eyes at half time. I'd been player manager, and I'd ask for his opinion. And he said, "No, Gaffer, you've said everything." And I'm thinking, well, and my heart's going 100 miles an hour. I'm coming to my career getting slaughtered by and so I had to change that, Richard. So I brought in Ali Dawson, who just passed away. I played with Ali at Rangers as well, and he was very good. He was very good. He had been coaching for a long time. He understood the game. He just got it. He got how I worked as well. So there I had an assistant that I could trust, that I could go and do my thing. So I think when our coaches that are on the call today, if you are the person that's in charge, I think it's critical your staff are supportive. I had great staff at FC Edmonton, as an example. Jeff Paulus was, he'd go to the end of the world for me, and I didn't have to look over my shoulder to see what was going on or what was going on behind my back. That is absolutely massive. But hiring or getting that support staff around about you is absolutely massive. And Jeff challenged me quite a bit. He said, "Have you thought of this? Have you done this?" And he was so much better. He was so much organized, so much better organised, and so on and so forth. That he was just a great assistant coach and very loyal. And he became the coach of FC Edmonton when I left as well. So that was testament to the work that he did.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, you surround yourself with good people, and it makes everything more enjoyable and more successful too. And I want you to talk a little bit more, if you can, about your time with the Canadian men's national team, working along or underneath Holger Osiek.
Yeah,
I know. Yeah, he's. I was still, like playing. I was still in university, when he took over, and I followed the team, and obviously they had some great success, and all that, and but I know he was maybe a little bit of a polarizing guy. I met him later and at conferences and stuff. So, love to hear your some of your experiences about that.
as I say, I got on very, very well with Holger.
Yeah,
very, very well. He said he wished he had brought me in when he first got the job, to be honest with you, Richard. But he was. I could see he was not the easiest person to get along with. Very opinionated, strong opinion, very professional. Dare I say, typical German in his approach with everything. Was so professional. He was so well organised and so well structured. He was terrific and very, very intelligent. But I thought that the way that his man management skills, I thought, I wouldn't do things that way. Now, not that I'm a delicate wee flower, Richard, but Holger, I thought, sort of went the other way. And here in Canada, where we don't often speak to people in certain ways, but Holger he could have got people's backs up. Let's say it that way. But his organisation, how he wanted things to happen, you could see that he was, a top level coach. But he was frustrated at times because, a lot of people around about him were amateurs, were volunteers, if you like. So he was the one that was trying to do everything. So he's come from a country that is arguably the best in the world in terms of preparation and organisation, to come into the Canadian setup, and it wasn't as professional at times as Holger would have liked to have been. Small staff and chopping and changing bits and pieces. So it wasn't an easy time for him, but he was successful. I mean, the Gold Cup itself was a wonderful achievement for those players and for Holger and his staff at the time. But I really enjoyed it. But the one of the things that I took away from that was always treating people with respect. Always treating people with respect. Not easy to do. He also said that if you had an opinion, give the opinion. And if it was something that you could justify, he would listen to that. He would observe that. And I like that, Richard, because I always say to our coaches, even our grassroots coaches here in Abbotsford, because I'll see some of them maybe trying to reinvent the wheel. I'll say, well, why are you doing this? And you could see down the line it could work. But at this moment, these players, they might not be ready for anything like that sort of training session. So he or she could justify what they were saying. So I would listen to it. If someone's saying to me, I'm going to play with a triangular ball in a square pitch, then I'd say, you're off your head there a little bit. But I would, that's how I would approach it. And Holger said, a couple of those things that were good, that were eye openers for me, actually.
Yeah, well, it's a fantastic experience, I'm sure, and I know, there's just so much, to talk about here, but I did want you to, if you can you touch on how you got to Derby County, and what was that like? And I know, again, probably the only Canadian that's coached in the EPL, and I'm sure all of our audience, as would I, would love to hear a little more about that one.
Yeah, no, it was probably about a 5-month experience, Richard. It could have been a lot longer. I could have gone back to when Derby were in the English Championship. Billy Davis called me, and we always got on very well, Billy and I. And he called me, he said, listen, wee man, he said, I'd like you to come back and be my assistant manager at Derby County. But there was a problem with another member of staff who was Billy's right-hand man all the way through. He wasn't being released from this other club. So basically, if I was coming back to be his assistant until the other guy joined us, and then I would drop down. Now, the difference in salary between the two, I may as well stayed at home. So I went, I can't take that risk, as much as the experience would have been phenomenal. But lo and behold, the other coach doesn't arrive. Derby County have an amazing season. They go to Wembley and win the final, you know, one of the wealthiest club games in the world, if not the wealthiest club games in the world. And Billy phones me, he says, wee man, he said, if we win today, I want you back here in June, because we're into the Premier League. So here I am, got the game on, I'm watching it on the BBC website, looking along here, the score, and long story short, Derby County win the game. Billy phones me, he said, okay, here's the deal, can you come back? And, you know, Maria and the kids were, you know, they were delighted, but they were staying here and I was going back to England. But the experience itself, I actually lived with Craig Brown, who was a former Scottish national team coach, and it was basically like living with the headmaster every day. His knowledge, his experience of the game, just a larger than life character, and so popular everywhere we went. So it was a great experience for me, Richard, still as a relatively young coach, to go back there and experience what it was like. Now, my job itself was, I was the first team coach, assistant first team coach. So Billy would give us groups to work with. We'd bring those groups together, and Billy would then take the belly of the session, if you like, and work on everything from there. And then in the afternoon, I would take the lads who were probably never going to play for Derby County again. So there was a number of lads, as well as some academy guys that would come in. So it was a group of about 12 or 14 players. And I really enjoyed that, because Billy says, have at it, you can do what you want in the afternoon. So that was really my get. I could still keep expressing myself and coaching them the way things were going along. And it worked out really, really well for me. We knew things were going poorly, Richard. You know, I actually saw one night at one of our games, the next manager sitting in the stand watching the game. And so it's just it's a horrendous business. It really is. And lo and behold, we got the nod that we were leaving. And, you know, it's one of those situations where, you know, you've put a lot of time and effort into it. You've made an incredible commitment from the family's point of view, and situations far more out of your control, you know, and that's the beauty, or the horrendous side of the job of professional football is, you know, you're only as good as your last result. And unfortunately, at that time, Derby County were really struggling in the Premier League. And as we know nowadays in professional football, you lose your job. So that's how the whole thing came about. But part of my job was to then go and do, Billy wanted 3 scouting reports on the next week's opposition. So let's say we were playing Chelsea the following week. Well, I would go and do the 3rd report. I'd go to Stamford Bridge or wherever Chelsea were playing, and you're sitting there like a tailor's dummy with a suit on in the board, or sitting with the educated ones, I used to say. And I'd got my pen, my paper, writing my notes and doing that. And Billy wanted all of this on his desk by Sunday morning. And so I would sit in the parking lot, type it all out, and then get it ready. When I had the internet, I could send it back to Billy. But it gave the traffic all the time to get away. By the time you know, they were long gone. I was almost getting arrested for loitering. I was there. But that was a big part of my job. So there was a lot of times I actually didn't see our first team play because I was doing the 3rd report on the game. But what an experience that was as well, because you get to see strengths and weaknesses of the opposition, and you're trying to adjust your training to adapt to that, you know. But it was quite an experience. You know, the Sky cameras are all there watching everybody as they're getting chucked out the gate, if you like, at the end of it. But yeah, dealing with the chairman at the end, making sure your settlement's there, and that they handled that side of it very, very well. But it's that side of the game that our coaches here, and I'm sure there's some young men and women that are desperate to become managers. You've just got to keep that in the back of your mind, that it's a very much at that level of football, it's a results-driven business.
Yeah, and I know in your notes to me you had mentioned, you know, you're only as good as the players you have at your disposal, and yeah, and perhaps not everybody sees things that realistically, so the expectations are super high, and you know, I mean, it's hard to deliver sometimes, but
for sure. And even at one stage, Richard, we looked at a player, and eventually we signed the player who was number 7 on our list. So you missed out on the first to get number 7. So
yeah,
it shows you what you're like, and you're competing against some magnificent football clubs.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so I guess when that experience finished, that was when you came back and you worked with Victoria. Am I getting that correct in your timeline there? Yeah. So you came back and then you're in the PDL. What was that like?
Yeah, it was great. I mean, we averaged about 3,000 people that were in fact, we play in the same stadium that Pacific do at the moment.
Yeah.
And I forget the name of the place now, but it wasn't quite as fancy as nowadays. Pacific have done a very good job. Langford is where where it is. But we were sort of semi-pro. Alex Campbell provided some jobs and some accommodation for players to come in from the States and so on to play for us, and it was great. I mean, it was I think we finished middle of the pack, to be honest with you, the year and a bit that I was there. But it was great because what it was I had again a very, very good assistant coach in Dave Dew, who's been a bit of a legend over on Vancouver Island for many, many years. I brought Dewey in. I'd known him for a while, and I trusted him, of course. And he knew the lay of the land. He knew, where to look for players and bits and pieces. So it was a very, very good rock to lean on, if you like. But the experience itself was great because we started from absolutely nothing. There was, and then we had an academy. Steve Simonson looked after our academy for us, did a great job as well. Very knowledgeable coach. So we were surrounded by good people that were all working for the same goal, which was so important.
Yeah. Well, it sounds it's kind of a similar theme, in the end, if you're surrounded by good people and everybody's working together, then it makes everything more enjoyable. And I guess perhaps it makes even some of the sacrifices that you're making feel more worthwhile too. Yeah.
It's exactly that, Richard, because if I'm going to go to work every day, I have to enjoy going to my work. Yeah. If I'm leaving my family to go somewhere, then I have to look forward to going to my work every day.
Yeah.
If I'm going into a room and I don't trust someone, I don't like something, I will tell you that. And thankfully in my jobs I didn't have to do that because I brought in people that were not always like-minded. There were differences of opinion. Of course, you'd have to have that at professional levels, but to be able to get up in the morning, if you're thinking, oh geez, I've got to go there today, then you're in the wrong job. You're in the wrong job, and that never happened with any of the staff that I was working with.
Sounds great. Yeah. And so I guess after Victoria was when you went to the university, and was that your first time coaching at that level, I guess, or?
Well, with the women, it certainly was. In Scotland, it wasn't until I came back to Abbotsford that I actually coached girls.
Okay. All right. Yeah. First time coaching women. Yeah.
Everything was professional football players to that point, and some young academy players, if you like. But I had never coached girls or women in any way, shape or form. So that in itself was an incredible experience for me, because I had to change my attitude as a coach. I had to change my approach as a coach, and it actually made me a better coach because I was finding myself breaking things down and making it easier for the players so that they would get better. And I loved it. I mean, the happiest time I have at the moment at Abbotsford is with our women's Premier League team, because once the girls get used to you, they trust you, and they see what you're trying to do and that you care. Oh, the environment is fantastic. It really, really is. But that was the same at UFE. The program before my arrival, and it's just where I live, so we're only I think it's 7 kilometers, Richard, from where I live. So the program I knew had struggled. It was just a college type. It wasn't taken too seriously, and that's with no disrespect to the coaching staff that was there before. But when I came in, they were going into the CIS, and I went, no, we're gonna make the most of this here now, because a lot of the players that had come through the Abbotsford Soccer Association, I took them into that program and did some heavy recruiting as well. And we finished, I think, about middle of the pack in the CIS. I know that we were same level goals against as University of Victoria, so I'll take that any day, because Tracy David has done such a great job at UVic. but I really enjoyed it. The girls responded to everything that you were asking them to do, and goodness me, we had some laughs. It was brilliant. That when you look like this, you have to have a sense of humour, Richard. The girls loved it. It was a great environment. So when I got the call, I was actually watching. I was still the head coach still doing some work at Abbotsford Soccer.
Yeah.
I was being the university coach, and I was watching our under-18s play. Alan Errington was looking after that group, and Bob Lenarduzzi called me asking if I'd like to come and speak to Tater Thordarson.
Mm-hmm.
And I did, and I met Tater, and we'll get to that chapter next. But it meant that I had to meet with the girls and tell them that I was leaving, and got all the players in the gym and just basically explained what had happened. And I must admit, I had tears in my eyes because I cared. I actually cared about what I was doing, and I cared about my players. And that was seen because it was quite an emotional meeting. But then they disliked me because I was leaving. It's just human nature, just the way it happened. And it's funny now because I'm actually with one of the women's Premier League players, is actually one of the girls I coach now that was in that UFE team. So
oh, great, yeah. So
it doesn't make me feel any younger, Richard, but it was a great experience.
Yeah. I mean, I know. Again, so much of what you're saying honestly rings true, and I talk about myself, but I've been involved in the university game for so long, and it is. I mean, it's sort of. I always describe it as sort of like it's the closest thing to being in a professional environment without being in a professional environment.
It is.
I think it's a good environment for Canadian coaches to get into because there are, relatively speaking, lots of positions available, especially as an assistant coach and all that, and you do get, you mentioned about apprenticeships. I mean, there's lots of excellent coaches working there, so you learn from them and then you make connections, and perhaps then something turns into a professional opportunity, which it did for you too there. So.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And I agree 100% what you said there, Richard, about the university levels. And I often don't think it gets the credit that it deserves.
No, it doesn't.
The work behind the scenes that go on to having a women's program and putting into that team, and the men's program putting into that team. I think that I hope that eventually that it will get recognised. And I think as the standards get raised here now, that it'll be a terrific pathway into CPL clubs and so on and so forth, professional MLS clubs, whatever we can do to try and get these men and women into these different levels. I think it has to happen,
Yeah, it's almost like an untapped resource of young players that haven't quite, made it to the pro level, and certainly the best out of those,
yes,
whether it's in BC or in Ontario or whatever, they're capable. There's definitely, I mean, I've seen it enough, I've been around it enough to know. It's not like 75% of them are capable, but perhaps the top 5, 10, 15% are definitely capable. So absolutely. So maybe if you want to speak a bit about your time at the Whitecaps.
Yeah, it was
in Vancouver.
I really enjoyed it working with Tater and Mike Salmon. Mike Salmon was the goalkeeper coach. I played in the English Premier League for Charlton. Great background, great experience. I think I know he's working at BC Soccer at the moment, but he was also the Academy Youth head coach with the goalkeepers at Arsenal. So his background in the game was second to none, but a very, very good football brain. I also brought him in with some of my national team staff, and we'll touch base on that, I think, in a couple of weeks' time or whatever it is, we're on again. But it was great, and we often used to go and chat and sit in Starbucks for hours at times just talking about football. And Tater, he was just a flatline. He was just a flatline, and he was the one who really, really influenced me about getting the balance right between work and having a life. And from that time, I have really worked to try to get some balance in my life, because I was a workaholic. I'm still a hard-working person. You can't be in this industry and not be. But I know that I've said, no, I'm not touching that today. I'm spending time here and I'm doing my thing with my family or whatever I'm doing, Richard. And Tater was a huge was a huge learning curve for me, because I just thought, no, I've got to try and out-coach somebody, I've got to try and outwork somebody, and it doesn't always work that way, that's for sure. But the time itself, it was, we were in the league before, and then coming into the MLS for the first year, that was fantastic. I mean, the stadium itself was, I've seen TFC Stadium bouncing, I've seen Montreal Stadium bouncing, I've been in it as a player, sorry, as a manager with FC Edmonton, and you know, I don't think anything touches that day when we beat TFC. I think it was 4-2 in the opening game at Empire Field, as it was called. It was just a portable stadium, Richard. But it was all scaffolding underneath it, but in the actual arena itself, you could have been anywhere in Europe inside this arena. It was wonderful. The seats went almost straight up, so you were almost on top of the pitch. It was brilliant. So, but the experience, again, we were new to it. MLS first year. It wasn't a terrific season for us that year. It was very much a starting from ground zero, if you like. But as I said earlier in the call, that I thought the Whitecaps, you know, moved on Tater far too early. I thought they should have given him longer. But that was, other people decided that factor for sure. But the experience itself, working again at that level, coming in every day, working with the players twice a day and so on, pre-seasons, all these sorts of things. Yeah, what an education that was too, because you're learning your trade, you're giving your experience to, you know, it's probably the best job in the world is being an assistant coach, because you're not the one who's getting, you know, pizza delivered to your house at 4 a.m. You're and so on and so forth.
You're not the lightning rod.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so you're the one who just flies under the radar and lives, you know, fairly flatline as well. But what it was good, I found as well, was that when things weren't going particularly well for Tata, that the three, myself and Mike, and even Darren Wallison, who was our kick guy at the time, we would meet and talk and get things out on the table. And because it's good to get things out, you know, so you can't keep things bottled up. So I think we were good support staff for Tata when he needed someone just to chat about. And it might just be something that totally off subject of football. It could have been anything, just to get his mind away from it a little bit. So again, it comes back to that support staff that you have.
Sure. Yeah. Another great story. And I like how, again, I remember reading your notes, and as I said, so much of what you said just hits home for me, but about finding balance.
Yes.
You know, and how difficult that is. And I think, you know, often, you know, the mentality sometimes can be, well, like, I know everyone else is working this hard. So like, you know, who am I? I'm not special. So, you know, I mean, if I'm not even going to work as hard as that guy, like if he's getting up at 5 o'clock and, you know, work until whatever, 8, 9, 10 at night, I have to do that too, or else how can I compete? Right. And that's almost like a circular type of logic that you know, perhaps you don't do your best work once you're overworked like that. Right. So,
yeah, I mean, I worked very closely with John Herdman, Richard, and what an experience that is. You'd actually think you're going to war, because, you know, I've been in John's house in his basement, and there's not a piece of the wall that's not covered with paper with writing on it, and that his attention to detail, there's no surprise. I mean, yes, he's inherited some wonderful football players now with the national team, but the work and the detail that John and the staff go into behind the scenes, I've been a part of it, and there's no surprise that the lads are doing as well as they are, and fingers crossed we get over the line here pretty soon.
Looks like it probably will. So. would be an excellent accomplishment. And yeah, I mean, as I said, I don't have the same amount of experience working with him as you did, but he came in right as I started working with the women's under-17 national was when he got the job, and he came to see all the, you know, the youth teams, and then I got to kind of connect with him again a little bit in the Pan Am. So I've seen how he works, and I know. You know.
You probably tell you that maybe our listeners would like this story. I was, the first time I joined in with John was with the women's team in the Cyprus Cup a number of years ago. Yeah, I hadn't met John before. I didn't know any of the staff other than Maeve Glass.
Oh yeah,
he's been around the team for years. Has done a phenomenal job for the CSA. So we're sitting there, and Rob Sherman, who for me is another incredibly intelligent man. He was the TD with Australia as well. Fabulous football brain. So you have John, you've got Simon Eady, the goalie coach, Rob, and a couple of other staff members sitting around this table because the players were arriving a day late. Mm-hmm. And John has this PowerPoint presentation I thought was a Star Wars film because there was things moving, there was all sorts of things like that. I'm thinking, oh my goodness me. It was very, very impressive, very, very impressive. And he says to me, he's using terms that I had never heard before in football. And I turned to him, he said to me, he says, Colin, he says, you've been quite quiet. He said, everything okay? And I says to him, are we still talking about football? Everybody started laughing, thankfully. But he says, oh, I asked him, it was just different terms for what I understood. So once I got to know those terms, I was okay. But it was very, very impressive, the work that went in behind the scenes.
Yeah, and I think I definitely wanted to, when we wrap things up, I want to ask you about, the future and what your thoughts are and stuff. But I definitely, one thing I did pick up from him is how good he was with, you can call it man management or just sort of the psychology of performance. More so, obviously, he's good. Like coaches, to be successful, you have to be good with your tactics and you have to be organized and all those things. And he was. But I think that perhaps what set him apart a bit from some other coaches that I knew, and what's really helped him is his ability to motivate players, his ability to, to find the right moments to be harder on them, and the right moments to change his approach, and overall just the psychological side of coaching. And I feel a little maybe like that's more the future of coaching. I don't know how many new discoveries we're going to make about how to put 11 people on the field and play, but to the psychological side anyway.
Yeah, I think it's massive, and John and the staff are all well versed in speaking about that and working on with players. He has a room that's called the Grow Room as an example, where all the players with the women's team they all had laptops. They'd go and they'd look at their individual, clips and so on from the game, and then he would speak to them, the staff. We would all speak to the players and help them. Just those little details that psychologically, yourself, Richard, when you see something on the screen, there's no hiding place there. And if it's a positive, great. But if it's a negative or you're correcting something, if you can put that across in a positive manner, all of a sudden the player's going from, oh, I did this really poorly. If you can turn that around to saying, well, listen, if you matched the run a bit earlier or whatever, you can make them feel good about actually watching a horrendous mistake that's caused us a goal. So these sort of details that John went into, as well as bringing in some guest coaches that were very, very intelligent people as well. It's no surprise that, that side of the game is so well looked after. I mean, you look at the number of staff that the men and the women's team have, it's hard to find players on the bench, they hardly get a seat there now. So it's everyone, the attention to detail to making sure everything is sorted out is absolutely wonderful.
Absolutely, yeah. So I think I'd like to just ask you about basically that next transition in your career and going back to being a head coach again at Edmonton.
Yeah, that was it's a job I loved. I really, really enjoyed it. And unfortunately, my wife and the family were here in Abbotsford.
Yeah,
for 5 years now. I had fabulous owners with Tom and Dave Fath. They were so supportive. I maybe could have gone to the well a few more times and asked for a bit more in terms of bringing more players into the club, but I never did because I never wanted to abuse that. And that was, is it a mistake? It didn't cost me my job. The league folding cost me my job. And I managed to sink 2 NASLs, one with a Blizzard and one with FC Edmonton.
You're the only Canadian to do that also. So.
So I'm becoming a history maker here. But, the things that I took away from that job, Richard, again, just the detail of organizing pre-season and organizing, Eric McAlee, a good friend who runs World Strides tours and stuff. We went to the UK in a couple of pre-season trips, so well organized and so well run, and it was great exposure for us, got us off to a good start. My first year was a poor year. and my last year, my 5th year, was a poor year. And, you know, it's one thing, and it's the same with university, probably lots of university coaches on the call here. You're only as good as the players that you have and that you can recruit. So I asked Jeff, my assistant, you know, I need to get all the games from the previous year. So Jeff sent me, you know, a pile of DVDs at that time, and I watched every game. So I said there was not a winning culture, there was not a competitive culture in the group. That was just a general observation. So I had to work on that. So I had to try and bring in players that would bring in my sort of culture, my beliefs in the game, that you have to work hard if you're getting any chance of winning a game of football. So I signed a couple of players. Both were Northern Ireland internationals, Albert Watson and Darryl Fordyce, who's still playing in the CPL. And they were fantastic signings for us, very professional. They just got it, and they were a terrific influence in the dressing room. And then, you know, you bring in players that you think are going to work out, but unfortunately don't. So your man management, how do you handle those situations? That's another one. You know, where you had to deal with one situation where there was a player whose family member was dying of cancer. You know, how do you handle that? You've got another one with a player's fiance has just been attacked by a dog. How do you handle those? There's absolutely everything that you could imagine. And once again, you're the person who has to deal with these situations. So, you know, there was a time in my life where I had a very short fuse, but now it's just through experience and just getting certain situations, Richard, where you just sort of flatline yourself and you think about it. You may need to talk to another couple of people before you actually make a decision. And there's nothing wrong with that as well, but you're the one who's actually accountable for what you do. So there was all of those sort of things, arranging pre-season, as I said earlier. And then you're the one dealing with the press. You know, I always enjoyed doing that side of it. You know, some of the press in Edmonton would rather have covered us than the Oilers at that time.
Yeah.
They were actually told you can't go and cover FC Edmonton. You have to be at the Oilers, which sums it up a little bit. Yeah. But you know, the nights that we had, the work. So you know, even with the Canadian Championships, if we were drawn against the Whitecaps, I would be starting to work on how we would play against the Whitecaps 2 or 3 weeks before that game. I'd bring the players in the afternoon, say, guys, I just want to plant this seed so that when we get closer to the Whitecaps fixture or the Montreal fixture or whatever it would be, here's how we're going to play. So you're little attention to detail, so you're always thinking ahead. You know, I was in the apartment, lived on my own for 9 months to a year, and you know, I'd come home and I'd work 24 hours a day. You'd get up in the morning and you're thinking about your job. You come home thinking about the job. You'd be watching videos. There wasn't a player in the NASL I didn't know, or agents dealing with those people all the time. And I'd prefer not to a lot of the time, but it is what it is. It's just a part of the game nowadays. But the whole educational side of it, from that level of football, was fantastic, absolutely fantastic. So when I lost the job there at FC Edmonton, it was because the NASL was in a bit of turmoil, and eventually the league itself folded. I came back to Abbotsford, and then I was offered a job in Norway in the second division, and I thought, well, the last thing on the earth I'm going to say to the little general is that I'm off to Norway now, and I don't think I would have survived that. That's for sure, with the wife, no question.
Well, yeah, I remember when I decided to leave Ottawa, was because, you know, we found out we're having our first little one, and you know, it just wasn't gonna work to, you know, to stay there. And Tony Waiters actually said to me that he said, well, you know, Richard, you have to drop your anchor somewhere. Yes. And I thought that was really it's good advice, you know. Yeah. So
very true. You need the kids need a base. They need you know, we've been in this house for 21 years, and it's been very, very difficult. It's been very difficult, and again, I keep repeating it, but the lifestyle, if you get to the top level, it's great, but there are so many coaches that are not at that level, that are fighting every result they can possibly do, or possibly get, I should say, sorry, that it's not an easy way to make a living, that's for sure. It's not always happy, shiny faces. There's pressure, you're accountable, to players, to management, to boards and some supporters. I think it's not an easy living.
Yeah, and maybe, I mean, I've always thought that sometimes I've used the analogy of, maybe it's not a good one, but almost like an addict, that because of those experiences you have in the stadium and the positive, you almost end up chasing that a little bit, and that makes everything else kind of worthwhile maybe, but yeah.
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
I go and watch the Whitecaps training because of the doing the colour commentary, and Paul Dolan, who's going to be on the show with us in a few weeks' time.
Yeah.
He turns to me, he says, "Wee man," he says, "do you miss this?" And I said, "I miss it every day. I miss it every day."
Yeah.
And just recently, I turned down an opportunity to speak to a CPL owner about being a technical director of the club. And I'm not a technical director. I want to be a coach. I want to be a coach. I can't sit behind the desk and work a laptop all day long. And I actually said, no, I'd rather not waste the owner's time. I'm not a technical director, although my title here is a technical director.
Yeah. Well, yeah. You know what? I mean, I know it's we're a little past time, but as I said, I wanted to see if we can wrap things up. Just maybe where do you see your own career, let's say, in the next, I don't know, 5 years or so, and where do you see things progressing? And then if you can comment on coaching in general. Again, I mean, that's our audience. We're dealing with coaches from Canada, from all over Canada, and even internationally as well. And we've got pro coaches, we've got university coaches, but we've got a lot of other people working at the lower level. So what does the future hold?
Well, I mean, I've just signed a new 5-year contract with Abbotsford Soccer.
Okay, well, that's easy. Yeah.
Fingers crossed I can see that one out. But you just never know, Richard, what's around the corner for anybody nowadays. And that door remains open. I believe that Ian and the board know that there may be opportunities that come up for me. And I'm going to cross that bridge when I get to it, or if I ever get to it. I'm not chasing jobs anymore, not that I ever did, but I've been there and bought the T-shirt, and I've been so fortunate, so grateful for the life that I've been given in football. I've been in coaching now, a professional football now for 40 years. I'm 57. I don't think like an old man. I can't help how I look, but I still keep up to date with how things are going. I worry a little bit about how complicated some of the things seem to get. I look at some of the things, I'm going, well, we did this 10, 15 years ago, but we just called it something different. I just think that, like I look at time, I'll use Manchester City as an example because they're such a phenomenal football team. But there's times when I don't see the sense of passing the ball 3 or 4 passes inside your 18-yard box just so that you're going to play it, goalkeeper to play it long. It doesn't. Some of the things, the modern trends, I guess I want to keep possession of the ball, but there's a time and a place for it at times, and you've got to respect the level of player that you have. You may have a vision of how you want your team to play, and this I can use from my own experience, Richard, at Hamilton. I wanted my team to play football. I wanted them to do the right things, but they were in a league where you had to roll the sleeves up and it was crash bang wallop. There wasn't about silky football, and I didn't change the way that I approached the game. I wanted, no, these were my beliefs in the game. I wasn't going to change. And I had a very experienced manager say to me, "Listen, wee man, you better change and your team's going to get relegated. I can see what you're trying to do. Even with the reserve team, I can see what you're trying to do. But it's going to go downhill." And I didn't change. So as a 33-year-old, that was an incredible piece of advice that I actually didn't listen to, Richard. People, when I'm always of the opinion, if someone's going to ask you a question, be prepared to hear the answer. And I didn't listen that day. I didn't listen enough to go more direct, if you like, so rather than try and play. But because we didn't have players that could do what I was trying to get them to do, and it cost me my job, because I resigned at Hamilton. But that was a big learning curve for me, for sure.
Right, great. Well, Colin, as I said, it's normally we only go an hour, but I feel like we could probably keep it going. But I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up now. I just want to say thank you again for so much for spending your time and just sharing all your amazing experience and knowledge and all that. I've learned a lot. I mean, I took a whole page full of notes while you were talking as well. So, I thank you so much again, and I wish you the best of luck, in your work here there at Abbotsford, and maybe we'll see each other on the pitch someday soon.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Richard and Tony, looking after this as well, and the coaches that are on the line, if anybody's got any questions, you can fire me an email as well. No problem with that at all. You may, as I say, you may not learn anything, but you'll get some advice.
Where can they reach you? I'll type it in the chat now.
Yeah, it's my name back to front, millercollins7@gmail.com.
Okay, I think I got that right. millercollins7@gmail.com. There you go.
Great.
All right. Okay, everyone. So thanks again, Colin. And just a quick note to everyone watching, as we always do when we end these things, if you've enjoyed it, if you've taken something from it, please feel free to share with your coaching colleagues. Help us, consider a membership if you haven't already done so, and help us to continue, to do what we're doing, and to do more webinars where we get great coaches from around the world, just like Colin. So thanks again, and we'll look forward to speaking to you soon.
Fantastic. Thanks, Richard. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Okay. Bye-bye, everybody.